Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Welcome, superhumans. Today, I'm thrilled to take you on a journey with Gaia Ma, a visionary leader in personal and spiritual transformation. Gaia Ma is the founder of the Tantric Way Process, an innovative approach that blends Tantra, trauma healing, breathwork, and conscious community living to guide individuals towards greater freedom and authenticity. As the co-founder of InanItah, an earth-based spiritual community on Ometepe Island, Nicaragua, Gaia Ma has created a living and learning center dedicated to regenerative living and the evolution of human potential. In this episode, we'll delve into the depths of sacred sexuality, explore the transformative power of breathwork, and learn how intentional communities like InanItah are redefining what it means to live in harmony with ourselves and the planet. Whether you're a seeker, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, get ready to dive deep into a conversation that promises to challenge, inspire, and awaken. So grab your headphones, take a deep breath, and let's step into the transformative world of Gaia Ma. Gaia, welcome to the Superhumanized podcast. I am so glad I get the opportunity to speak with you. I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you as well. Thanks for reaching out to connect.
100%. When I learned about what you do, who you be in this world, I was just fascinated. I was like, I love what this woman is about. Your path through life, your journey, from what I learned was fascinating. What resonated with me was the sense of that you are someone who, from an early age, it seemed like you also had this desire to connect with spirit. It's something that I was like, that really struck a chord with me. You grew up also in different places, just like myself, were exposed to different cultures. And yeah, you are seem like this bridge between worlds, firmly rooted in the spirit and firmly rooted in this earth, not just by your beautiful name Gaia, but also what you do with the community you've co-founded. We'll get it. What I mentioned in the introduction, we'll get into that a little further down the road. But I would love for the audience to get a little bit of a taste of your journey. Like, how did you get to where you are now, especially given from where your journey started, which is quite an unusual path.
Yeah, I think the short answer, I'll give you a long answer in a moment, but the short answer is a continuous openness to allow change, to not be stuck in any identification. And actually, I'm visiting my parents, and I was recently talking to my mom, and she asked about something similar. And I think I recognized at some point that no matter what kind of existential reality there might be before or after life, that this 80-ish years that I would have as this human experience in this sack of skin had to be maximized.
Mm.
And so I want to live the life, and always did, like the life of the roller coaster, this world. There's no way I could drink or imbibe the totality of this experience, but I'm going to do my best to follow the passion that guides me towards whatever role might be next, whether that's cleaning toilets as a bouncer in a lesbian bar, or being the founder of a new age spiritual community, or being a construction worker who works on rooftops. These are all jobs I've done and things I've done in the world. And it's just this lust. It's a lust for life.
Mm.
And I sense so often that something about the way the construction of our world is really, people have forgotten that there is the potential to live it all, or to live close to all of it, or that we don't have to stay stuck. We don't make a choice once in a lifetime, and that's a destiny. We can turn around, and there are eddies in the stream, and there's a magic and a synchronicity available that if we follow that, we can become so much greater than we would have been had we stayed within inside the confines. And so it's this radical willingness to listen to this tiniest voice inside and follow it. And my journey took me from being a military child, backpacking around, seeing guns and being exposed to the Cold War and being in fear and following, yet at the same time, following my inspiring parents who took me backpacking around Europe because they could in those days. And then really in the 1980s, seeing that because the world was moved by money, I decided I wanted money. And so I studied economics and I went to NYU and I excelled on a scholarship program there. This kind of blue collar military girl goes to New York. And then something about, I had a very good paying corporate job out of college at 19 years old, and I was doing annual reports for Pfizer. Bizarre. IT work back in the days of early IT graphics. And then somehow at a Joan Jett concert, I met a bunch of strippers. And 3 weeks later, I was a stripper in New York for years. I never got to be a bad girl until that time. And so I hook, line, and sinker went for the drugs, sex, rock and roll. And I remember, though, I think that there's something really, I look back on this moment. And I remember when I started taking a lot of drugs, we were speaking earlier today about the ways that we numb ourselves. And I needed to be numb at that time because I couldn't integrate the world that I was seeing. And what was I going to say about that? I wanted to flash to the numbness. But there was something about taking drugs where I remember making a conscious choice. That's what I wanted to share. I felt like there was no way that as a relatively sharp woman in this world, I saw people who seemed a bit more simple and they seemed happier than me. And I felt like maybe if I could kill some brain cells, and if I could kill some brain cells, maybe I could be happier. And that's a real shame to think there was a 20-year-old woman out there, 21, 22-year-old woman out there with a bright light that perceived the only way to survive was to kill that light and to consciously choose to do. I'm grateful for it because it took me into a depth of humility. I went way far into addiction, really far into addiction. And it took me, friends of mine died. I DOA'd bodies. And yet in this falling apart and finding myself in trailers with meth heads smoking methamphetamine with paraplegics, I found in that a compassion and an empathy that I don't think I was a bit proud as a child. I was gifted. I was a high-performing athlete, a high-performing academic. And so I trust that Spirit took me on that journey because I needed to learn about my own humanity and my own abject weakness. I knew about my strength. I didn't know about my frailty until then. So I got to live that part of the adventure, that part of the roller coaster ride that went all the way down into the depths of needles, weird things. And then somehow there was this reach of the earth that started to emerge through yoga. It was really yoga that was a turning point for me. I was an athlete. I was a highly competitive gymnast, national level competitions in my youth. And I'd lost all of that embodiment with the drugs and everything, the healthy embodiment. And somebody turned me on to a yoga thing in New York when there was one place to do yoga. It was an old-fashioned Hindu yoga center. And there I started to move my body and meditate for the first time. And I kept the addictions. It was like I lived a bit back and forth, and then went to a yoga ashram and put my feet on the earth for the first time in years. And I think that was the beginning of the transition. Then I went back to New York and I couldn't really live in New York in the same way. And then I started traveling to the Caribbean, and I was so phobic of insects back in those days that I would actually tear up and spray insect spray all over with a lighter and panic and freak out if I saw just the tiniest little bug. Now I live with tarantulas. It was actually it was a following of that spirit call to go into to go on a holiday, a Caribbean holiday with a boyfriend. And we imbibed a bit of MDMA and a bit of LSD together. And I went and I took my booties off and I stepped in the sand for the first time in the Caribbean with this medicine. And 3 days later, I tore up my ticket and stayed in the jungle. Quite amazing, no? And slowly I made my way to a life steeped fully in nature, which is where I live now. And I got really inspired to create an opportunity for other people to do the same, to come back to the simple ways. As a child, I was very into Buckminster Fuller's geodomes and very into solar and the science behind it. And so it was a spirit call that was ancient. I think if you talk to many people who talk about purpose and law of attraction and manifestation, we can look back to our childhood, our adolescence, and the interests we had then, that purity, are a part of our meaning and our purpose. And in that way, it was a full circle reclamation around the reconnection to spirit through nature. When I was a child, I wanted to be a nun, and but I also wanted to be in Playboy. Yes, because I was allowed to look at these images of women. My parents they're Americans, but they got exposed to the German view of the human body. And I perceive them both to be very sexual entities. And it was the 70s and early 80s. So I wasn't shamed around it, which is blessed. I was taught to compare my measurements to those women. So it's a little bit of distortion. But overall, I was taught to celebrate. But at the same time, there was this divide. Can I be a nun and a playgirl model at the same time? I've learned now that I can.
Yes.
I don't think that was through my lineage. I think I had to rediscover that for myself. I know that was one of the topics that you mentioned, and it is a jazzy topic for me that you mentioned you wanted to tap on. I think we're edging on it. This unapologetic womanness. Yeah, I'm such especially nowadays for me, I'm quite moved by what I see going on politically. I won't get political. I don't think it's a value.
Yeah.
But I do think that we're in a time now where I stepped away from women's questions for a long time because I'm more gender. I'm a man and I'm a woman. I have a cosmic cock and a physical pussy. And and I absolutely love the combination of having a highly feminine, quite nice, like for our culture right now, I have a really good bone structure. I'm considered one of the attractive types of women overall. And I love having that power, but also the power of having quite a direct willingness to be in my masculine and my personality. And each of us has our own balance in that way. I think in our society right now, having a masculine personality and a feminine look is probably a good deal of the cards. Yeah.
And there's also, we talk about that. I think it's always when we consciously choose or intuitively choose how we flow with this masculine or feminine. It's a beautiful thing when we are by circumstances. It's not even a conscious thing then, but we feel like we need to go into a certain direction out of self-preservation, perhaps. I actually have quite a lot of women that I know that are very much in their masculine. They're super depleted. They don't feel well. It shows up as physical dis-ease or emotional, mental dis-ease. And a lot of times there are different causes. It's okay. I'm in this world, and the constructs of how to function successfully, let's say in a business world, are still molded towards the masculine. Let's imagine men would bleed once a month. You bet that the entire working and economic situation would be built around 15 days a month that the poor men would bleed. I don't mean,
No, I think you're spot on correct with that. And this is where one of the things I'd love to highlight is the difference between being in our masculine and feminine and the difference between being a man and being a woman.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. If women had been which they were in Wyoming, and we could talk about that at another point, but if women were leading the corporate culture, what you said just now would be absolutely true. Also, with what you said before, I think it's important to recognize that everything in every moment, every human has their own balance of masculine and feminine
Yeah.
arriving. And it's the idea that we should become more masculine and more feminine to heal something may not be the angle to take.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the angle to take is, what can I do in this moment to elevate, mature, actualize a more healthy feminine or a more healthy masculine in this moment to create a better me?
I like that a lot.
For example, if I'm feeling depleted because I'm exerting too much of the kind of chasing masculine, then my feminine is also getting depleted because the depletion is generalized. How could I elevate this masculine that's being called rather than lean into nurturing myself with the feminine, which is also healthy, but could I become more clear? Oftentimes, for example, what I've seen when people feel this kind of, I'm too much in a masculine world, and I'm feeling depleted by it, I often see that the answer comes from having healthier boundaries.
Ooh, good one.
Healthier boundaries is actually a clearer masculine.
Yes.
It's a
Exactly.
more awake, more mature masculine. It's not that I become less masculine.
Yes.
It's
Excellent.
that I actually ask my masculine to step up in a way that serves me.
Yes. Yep. And that's something I'm just speaking for myself now. When I was a little girl, I was not taught how to have good boundaries. My
Mm.
thing, I've talked about this multiple times, but my thing was back then always make sure everybody's fine. I took responsibility for others' feelings, and I would rather say yes, sure, when I actually meant no. And so this, of course, that
I
extremely.
find that's really true too. You mentioned to me earlier that you have a German background.
Mhm.
I find that Germans are really conditioned to be super people pleasing,
Ah, interesting.
as well as maybe women, of course, are culturally by and large taught to be more accommodating for sure. But the German culture, I also think, is a layer that comes on because I perceive that women in the American culture also have it, but I see it to a lesser degree.
Ah, that's super interesting. That's the first time I hear Germans being referred to as people pleasers.
But they're direct, but
Yeah. Yep.
think about the patio, never too late of music, always giving space to like that. I remember as a child, it was like if the patio, this is probably ancient, early 70s Germany, but if the sidewalk wasn't swept properly, the neighbors had something to say about it. And
Hey, huge. Yes, huge. And literally, I remember this was, oh my God, maybe 2 years ago. I was visiting my parents' Germany small town and I was taking care of them. They both were not doing so well physically then. And so tons of chores in the house and I was running right and left, taking care of stuff. And one thing that I missed doing was there's this beautiful house that is also what do you call it? Historic house. It's 200 and some years old. So it has these wooden shutters. Beautiful.
Berkshire House or whatever they're called.
Yeah, so you open the shutters and then you have the windows. And so I just forgot to open the shutters in the second floor because I was doing so many things at once. And it was maybe 2 in the afternoon, and my mom was, "Oh, you gotta open the shutters. What will the neighbors think?" And I was like, "Who cares what the neighbors think? You're sleeping." It was just so funny. So you are absolutely correct, Gaia.
I've worked with some German men who don't understand because it is more perceived as a woman thing to not be taught healthy boundaries, but actually this piece of cultural propriety can be part of that affects the man and woman in this way.
Yeah. I'll give you an example of my dad's, and this is really fascinating. So he had smoked ever since he was a little boy, 12 years old. He was born in 1935, got his first cigarette by an American GI. He was in the American sector. Second World War ended. And so he smoked all of his life. And he stopped smoking about, he's going to be 89 this year. I think he stopped smoking maybe something like 20 years ago. So half a century smoking and highly intelligent human being, but all the arguments and the science, he never stopped smoking. And then also, even when they ratcheted up the prices on cigarettes, he was always very, not that he needed to be, but he was always very particular about not spending too much. That also didn't do it. Then one day to the other, he stopped smoking. And like years later, I asked him, like, "Dad, what actually caused you to stop smoking?" It was at the time when it was the first time that smoking cigarettes, instead of being advertised as cool, there was actually big campaigns going through media where this is harmful, not just to yourself, but to others. And if you
One around you.
smoke, you're a horrible person to other people. And he didn't want to be perceived as that. Made him stop smoking from one day to the next.
Yeah, I'm not so keen on the control techniques, but if it works.
Yeah, and to your point, the importance of the outside perception of oneself, and which
Yes.
is the people pleasing thing. I was
Yes.
very caught up in that too until, gosh, probably until I was in my mid-30s. But so I would like to go into speaking about sexuality, and I want to talk about Tantra as
Okay.
well, because this is something that you are a bridge, if I may say, a teacher, a facilitator, someone that's deeply connected with and knowledgeable about. eh, Tantra is often misunderstood, especially in the West, and it's primarily seen through the lens of sexuality. But historically, as far as I understand from my limited knowledge, it's much, much more. It involves a really profound connection between the physical and the spiritual realms. And can you elaborate for us on the broader spiritual dimensions of Tantra and how Tantra can be used to facilitate a personal and also collective transformation, perhaps?
One of the things I first want to say about Tantra, that's important for people to understand is that there's no one Tantra. And I think it is more of a worldview and yeah, let's call it a worldview for today. You have Tantric Buddhism, Tantric Hinduism, Tantric Jai, I think the pronunciation. And really what Tantra, there are people who will argue with this because it's a history that goes way, way back in which texts are the Tantras and which ones are not. But to give us lay people, or relatively lay people, an understanding what was different about the tantric versions of these spiritualities that were pre-existing the notion of tantra is that the invitation of spirit is to be alive as spirit in the body. Prior to that, what we saw was a lot of reaching out towards spirit as separate from our nature. We'll talk about nature now. So spirit is the nature of embodiment versus I am here, the yogic thing that a lot of people may have heard by now because yoga has become so ubiquitous, is that my body is a vehicle. In the yogic or pre-tantric philosophies, our body was a vehicle by which to reach the God outside of ourselves. Tantric perspectives turned that on its head and said, actually, it's a vehicle to be the spirit. So that one of the other ways that we can, or that I like to talk about, or when I'm working with people around how can we live a spiritual life that's a really grounded, fucking real life, is that the Buddhists talk about taking refuge. The Tantric Buddhists talk about taking refuge, and all the Buddhists do. The refuge, a tantric form of refuge would be to, when we use the chakra system, which has become quite a common thing to know about, that the lower chakras are our more base material chakras connected to our earthly life. And as we rise and transcend's a really popular word right now. I'm not a big fan because of how it's being used right now. But as we rise and transcend these more dense energy centers, and as we start to awaken a set of senses that is beyond the physical and into the more metaphysical, our inner hearing, our inner seeing, and we're resonating at a more subtle level, then we can start to take refuge in this place where everything is one. This is, in a modern way, you'll see this most easily accessed through things like DMT experiences, 5-MAO experiences, which can be a fast track. But if in any kind of meditative technique, whether these are breath meditations or ancient tantric meditations or some of the newer Osho style meditations, effectively they're taking us into similar brainwave states that allow us to have this understanding. Oh, wait a minute, I don't actually end at my skin. Wait. Oh, whoa. Everything is connected. And Einstein, if I'm a mathematician or a scientist, I might access it through E=mc². Nothing ever dies. That was my first entry point, actually. I'm a bit of a scientific mind. But then the lived experience of that through meditation, through experience, through collective cult-like. You go to an American rock concert, that feeling is available. It's not just available in what we call, what some of the people who are more busy with spirituality make it available through. Any kind of group, collective experience suddenly starts to bridge that field for us as well. My country western listening sister seems to get that feeling of connection through going to massive concerts. And when I talk to her about her experience of that, is her refuge, that I'm connected to something bigger than myself. And so the tantric says that my work as a human is to, yes, elevate, recognize this capacity to connect to the whole through whatever means is my means. And to connect to the whole and to be able to take refuge, that connection is there. And then the tantric says, okay, now it is my role to live and bring that back down into density, bring it back through the portal of discomfort, not to be like in a bliss bubble the rest of my existence, which is effectively a spiritual escapism, but to say, I am willing to live here in samsara, recognizing that nirvana is available at any moment. That is the refuge I hold in the center of my heart or above my head or however I access it. That my will and thy will are always one, even though I experience them as not one. And that intellectual, high mind, subtle recognition, depending on how I feel it in my body, I can feel it. Not everybody feels it in the body, and it's not for me to say how someone should feel it. But in the tantric world, the idea is raise the energy up to recognize the oneness. Be so clear about that oneness that one can drop all beliefs, all identity, and be a servant of that connection in every moment. To be a puppet, I like to think of the idea of being a puppet on God's string. You asked me you asked me about my history. Like, how is it that I could be all these things that I've been? And that's just with an infinite, the more and more, yeah, it's, I don't want to elevate myself. It's not an elevation of self, but it is available to us to be able to listen deeply and wildly. And that's why the connection to nature is so important, because it is through our wildness that we become the puppet on God's string. The tantric is a puppet on God's string.
I love that, Gaia. That is so profound and so beautiful. And it really connects with something that has awoken within myself as well, where, this growth, it's not about to transcend. It's not about transcending this world, going to this better place. No, it's not about going to heaven. We want to use this world. It's actually about bringing heaven to
It's creating
earth.
heaven.
Yeah, creating heaven here and to basically incarnate the divine in our human form here on this realm. And when you talked about this notion of transcending, going away in the spiritual communities, it's actually not much different from we talked about it before. Elon Musk.
Meditation is a drug.
Yeah, and it's like Elon Musk in a different way, not so different, but let's leave this place and go
Yeah.
live Instead of taking care of this place and making it the best ever.
Or at a minimum, giving equal attention to both potentially.
Yes, right. Yeah,
Okay, 'cause that is to say, yeah, to give equal potential to both.
I
Equal.
agree. Yeah, and I'm a fan of space exploration.
I am
And
too. Look at your image.
oh yeah, totally. And
What a reference point to be
yes,
able to see
and,
back with. One
and
of the I want to mention a nice way that I think there's a great thinker of our time who's worth noting here is Ken Wilber
yes,
and his notion of transcending and including. I think if people are currently operating in a transcendent framework, I think that using his terminology to understand that to transcend is to also include and not to abandon is
mm,
a really lovely way to grasp what's being called forth in that tantric notion. And that's one of the other things I wanted to mention about tantra, actually, is that actually, really, although it's been hyper commodified and I have a lot of issues that could be discussed in another moment, the modern new age human is really a tantric human. What the new age movement is pointing towards today is a very tantric frame. I think we have transcended the notion of the first people who started studying. You look at your Ram Dass, for example, who's a great teacher. The Richard Alberts, the gurus who sat on their pulpits back in in this revolution of bringing spirit back into a Western union of science and spirit, coming out of the materialism into something greater. I think we've transcended, excuse me, beyond that into a more tantric understanding. So I think sometimes trying to make something that's already tantric might be part of where there's a challenge in the modern frame. Yeah. And I do want to speak to tantric lovemaking for a moment because it is so
yeah,
important.
yes, please.
Tantric sexuality. Because that is I've had people recently, very intelligent people ask me, for example, what is the notion of a dakini? And a dakini is comes from tantric Buddhism, and it is actually meant to be a flying, like an aspada. It's a spiritual being, effectively a female Buddha. But if you look up dakini online today, you will find a bunch of women who will happily give you a massage that has a happy ending. And they will refer to this as being a dakini. And that's where a lot of the messiness has come about. You know what I mean? That's the distortion. But there is something about tantric sexuality that's worth noting because tantra was one of the only spiritual texts that spoke of sexuality at all. What's important to note about that is that the sexual tantric adepts, much like the Dalai Lama today, would have been picked from a community at an adolescent age to go into a monastery of sorts or a kula of sorts to learn all of these energetic arts. These were not people who lived in the everyday world. These were not people who were trying to raise children, maintain families, maintain careers. These were people who were given the gift of refuge so that they could cultivate this art. That's not to say that cultivating some of these arts can't be beneficial for us, but I think it's really important to understand the level of mastery. Our sexual energy has power to create new humans. When I was younger, I may have downplayed that a little bit in my rebellious need to take sexuality out of its Christian cage, which I think culture is busy doing right now. But I think in that process of reclaiming sexuality, some of the respect for that power was lost. And so I'd like to bring it back into a frame, not a fear of it, not a judgment of it, none of that, but just a fucking respect that this shit has a lot of juice. And when used poorly, like an atomic bomb,
Yeah.
things get real. But when used wisely, things can get really real as well.
Yeah. And the sexual creative power can refer to, of course, to procreating, creating
And it,
children, but it can mean a lot of other things as well. Even if I have no children by choice, I see my sexual creative power to, it goes into everything.
It
Uh,
is, and that's the bridge I'm about to make. Yeah, but just to make it clear what kind of an energy it is.
mhm,
Like it is that powerful. Yeah,
mm,
and that is one of the things it can do. What the tantrics were busy with was harnessing the power, the eros, the lust, the will to live, like our sexuality on a very primal level is actually the energy of that you see in all carbon-based life form, the will to survive.
mm,
You
mhm.
cut a plant, it goes to seed, that is its fertility. Our fertility is wrapped up in this desire and this urge to merge. Yeah. And Tantra teaches us, some of the tantric techniques teach us to be able to do exactly what you're talking about, is harness this power with integrity to create things that are maybe not children, maybe our communities, maybe our new ways of life. What's what I've seen happening lately, though, that is a bit, I think, frightens me. To be frank, it frightens me. When I was taught these tools of sex magic, which come from the tantric traditions, I was taught that these tools could be used to create basically anything I wanted.
Right.
And there's truth in that. I don't think I was given enough. And when I teach in a different way than I was taught, that's the nature of teachers and students. There's always a shift. Um, I really try to focus people's attention on what can I manifest within myself so that I become a healthier agent in the outside world. When I try to manifest $1 million because I need it, because I think XYZ is a good idea, there's something in there that's a distortion because the $1 million is a distortion. Because the money is a distortion based on the current culture. If I say I would like to manifest within myself a higher accuracy in time management because I notice that's what's keeping me from having the $1 million. I'm doing something that's very different because when we start to manifest in the 3D world based on our mind's idea of its wants, what we're actually doing is engaging in something that's very akin to black magic. And I see some of the people that I know that have learned these tools, I see them using them in ways that I think could be more damaging than beneficial.
You elaborate a little more about how why you have the perspective that it's very akin to black magic.
Black magic, that terminology is shisty.
Yeah.
It's sloppy. So let me try to reframe what I mean by that. Is what people would perceive of as black
Yeah.
magic. And it is black magic. It's black tantra. The tantra of manifestation work is considered to be black tantra. That might be frightening to some people. White tantra is this practice of elevation. Red tantra is the connection that where I might use the sexuality as to build a bridge of union so that I would become a procreator. And then the black tantra is the use of this sexual energy for manifestation. Black being matter, dark, not
Exactly. Doesn't
being
mean
evil,
bad. Yeah.
not being evil. So let's frame that. Let's go and okay, you can look at a book called Kiss of the Yogini. It's super academic. Most people would never want to read it. I will point to it. And this man talks about you've tracked Joseph Campbell at all?
Yes.
I figured. Okay, so if we track Joseph Campbell's cross-cultural mythology, you can see how the tantric witches or the tantric adepts, you can look at the archetypal lineup of them with the old pagan witches.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a full-on same. There's a pagan tantra. You can look at it in the Vesica Pisces symbolism, and the tantra goes across all cultures. They may not have called it tantra, but you can look at a Druidian tantric revolution as well, which some people call the feminist revolution. When we reclaimed the body, it was actually a feminist revolution in spirituality, but that's a side note. When I cast so the pagan witches talk about it like this. When I cast a spell, which is effectively when I choose to use my sexual energy to manifest something in the 3D world, I'm casting a spell. There's one finger pointing out. How many are pointing back at me? When we use these potent energies, the karmic imprint of return is exponential.
Yes.
So it is very important that we are sure that what we're asking for is in the best interest of the whole.
Yes. And this is also where this be careful what you wish for comes.
Yes, exactly. And as I look back into the past, and I think about, and this is, yeah, I don't know if do you track Daniel Schmachtenberger at all?
A little bit.
Little bit. One of the things he posits is that maybe we haven't done enough, we don't put enough energy into looking at the potential outcomes of the research that we do or the
Right.
actions that we take. I point to him in that way. So let's go to Oppenheimer. I guess
Mm.
there was a movie about him recently. I didn't see it, but he seems to be he's a good one to point out right now. Mm, nuclear fusion was originally developed as a way to create more energy for humanity. But then we need a tool of destruction. So what do? We reach into this tool that was created for good. The road to hell is paved with our best intentions, that other one. And so if I look, there's so many times where God, a good meaning, heartful human being had an externalized dream and it blew up in our faces. How many times have I seen that happen personally, collectively, historically? And so what I came to with that is it not better to focus my manifestation energy on creating the superhuman, to point to your podcast title, actually, to superhumanize?
Yes. Question is, though, Gaia, we often know this is what we should do. This is a good idea. This is potentially a bad idea. But until we get to the point where we actually experience the consequences of our actions, and it's not just a intellectual concept, often that we don't integrate them. I've heard you talk about as well,
Say that again. I want to make sure I'm catching.
yeah, so we can know in our minds as a intellectual concept, I do this. If I take this action, whether it's manifesting, whether it's doing something in the
I
physical
got you.
world,
Okay. We
uh,
can intellectually project forward, but that is never the lived experience.
yes. And
Okay.
while we may even know that there might be an outcome that's not in the best interest to the whole or not even to ourselves, we may still take the action because before we actually experience it, it's not really embodied. It's not gnosis. It's something
Hmm.
that still remains in the theoretical. And I've heard you talk about something that really fascinated me, where you spoke about how we have learned we were capable of destroying this world, and
Absolutely.
that we now are on our way, hopefully, also learning how we, and it's not about saving the world, it's like also saving all of this, how to become stewards of the world. And knowing that we have the capacity for destruction actually also gives us the responsibility.
Oh, yes. That is
Yes.
what you've heard me say.
Yeah.
Yes.
For healing or doing the opposite. So is it not sometimes necessary not to condone bad
Yeah, absolutely. I'm highlighting a point
intentions?
because I think it's overlooked. That does not mean that I'm not with you 100%. How could I have ever known based on my own story? And I love this. I used to have the website called Gaia Gnosis. So I love that you referred to that terminology, but intellectual logic would have never taken a 20-year-old, very bright woman and sent her on a journey of drug addiction.
Yeah.
So I resonate with what you're saying. There are mistakes that must be made,
Mhm.
that must be made for our evolution.
Mhm.
And this evolution into stewardship that I think you and I are both. I love this way that you're saying we're not here to save the world. I think on some level, when I was younger, I definitely had to process this notion that it was my responsibility to save, and I might still carry that.
Well,
Some, but the stewarding is key, worth always just being cautious about how much we externalize.
oh, yes. I'm
Our
I I'm
manifestation.
in
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with you on that
Yeah.
too. I have
And so
seen that.
I see culture leaning towards, let's push towards manifesting outside at this frame. So I thought I'd bring in the conversation
Yeah.
about the internal, but it is a dance. He hated using this technique of sexual energy magic. I birthed the InanItah community with many people sharing this technique together.
Please tell us
Um,
more about this community real quick for those who
okay.
don't know about
InanItah is a living and learning center with a vision for shared ownership. It's still currently owned only by two people.
it. Mhm.
It's an ongoing living and learning experience for coming back into a new way of life. It's a new paradigm lifestyle. It's a highly non-consumptive lifestyle. It's a remembering how to chop wood, carry water. It's a reconnection to the earth. All the buildings are adobe. Every day involves a checking in authenticity with each other. So it's a place for personal and planetary evolution. A reminder that actually through these actions of living slow and close to the earth, we become more connected to spirit. That there is a dissociation that is necessitated by the modern lifestyle. And this is an opportunity to come back to a seed of remembrance. I consider it now to be a seed that I'm saving. There are a lot of other inspirations that I have in the world, and a lot of people, business coaches and whatnot, are asking me to maybe put that aside for now. But it is one of the most precious seeds. I've had people write letters 10 years later. I've been to all these other eco communities that have popped up since, nothing with such ecological integrity.
Mhm.
It's an opportunity to explore what it is to reconnect with nature. We cook on fire, we have some gas. If we want comforts, we have them. We have a hot tub, but we come together as a community and we put logs into a tube that supports the hot water to become hot through nature, not through some artificial form. It's an exploration, yeah, in creating a kind of luxury. I eat food that I could never afford to eat. Right now I'm in the United States. All of my food there comes from either my property or properties within 5 kilometers. And that is my oil, my spices, my everything. It's priceless luxury to be there. And it's a priceless luxury of also never having to wear a mask.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh, that
Like,
there's so much to unpack here, Gaia,
yeah,
from what you just shared, these amazing foods that most people would not be able to afford unless they can go, let's say, to a Whole Foods or a Sprouts or an Erewhon.
it doesn't have that food. Everyone
And you're
doesn't have
right.
that
Uh,
food. It's priceless. It's
Yes.
not available.
Right.
Almost.
Yeah.
There's gardens. You're better off getting it from your Krishna gardens. Your Krishna gardeners in your neighborhood than Erewhon.
Yes, you are actually correct. Yes. I rephrase that in my
Yeah.
mind. What you said, yes. And also what you said, you to not wear a mask. Because most of us nowadays, we have this persona, which comes, I believe, from a Greek word. Actors used to basically speak through masks. So the sound would come, sonos would come through the mask. So persona is actually the that you wear
Mhm.
in order to be accepted and be able to function in the society. Most of us are not raised to be authentically ourselves and to be really connect to our self, capital S. So I think what you're doing, that it's on Imanita is on Ometepe Island, right?
Inanita. So let me just give you a wee bit of background. Inan means grandmother and Ita means grandfather. And it comes from the old Nahuatl language, which this was a divine pair responsible for the evolution of humanity, the grandmother and grandfather in the state of eternally becoming. So Inanita rests between two volcanoes on an island that is made of these two volcanoes. One is fire-filled and active. The other is water-filled and dormant. And these two volcanoes come together to form an infinity symbol, it's like an infinity road that goes around it. And this island is in the middle of a lake. So it's a sweetwater beaches. And Inanita rests if the two volcanoes were breasts in the heart and overlooks the lake and the other volcanoes.
Oh,
Super special.
oh, that's magical, Gaia.
Mhm.
And how, what you just said with you live without a mask. How have you seen this affecting people who come to live there or to visit? Have you see what effects are that when somebody finally finds themselves in a place and in a state where they can just truly be themselves? And what can mainstream society learn from that?
I think there's a few things. Joy is the first word that actually came to my mind. I was thinking of one particular woman who came to live with us last year. Very LA, very Erewhon, very Whole Foods. I'll never forget, it was so sweet. She came and sat at our table with a little cardboard box of food that she had brought from our island's first to-go food place, and it looked so and yeah, and watching her over the course of a couple months just unfold into trusting that we would love her even if she was herself.
Oh my goodness.
There was such liberation. She was very much into the medicine music and stuff and started out really shyly performing these medicine songs as she had heard them perform before. And by the end of it, she had her own flavor, her own style, her own newness that she was not afraid to break out of. The other one that it's not so much I've seen it in InanItah, but it's more in my professional capacity.
Mhm.
I do 3 and 5 week trainings with people. So very intensive, very long trainings. Oftentimes I'm holding them by myself or with one assistant. And I've had my students who are training with me ask me, like, how is it that you don't collapse at the end of these trainings? How is it you hold up your energy? Like, how? And I have really had to reflect on it because to me it seemed like not much. But actually, I think it's because I'm not spending any time putting on a mask.
Mhm.
I'm not spending energy, not time, but there's energy. I see how much wasted energy there is in holding up the persona. I love that you use that word. It's a perfect word. There's so much wasted energy in holding up the persona. Even in getting on this call, I was like, I brushed my hair, I did all the nice personal things. But then I've been watching myself like I came on with a little bit of a persona, but I'm watching myself now. I don't normally sit with my feet on the floor. So now my knees up by my shoulder and I've laid off and this is the real me more again. And how much more alive is the conversation now that we've
Yeah.
dropped through layers. And so I think people learn to liberate their energy. I've seen people change careers. I've seen actually, ironically, I have seen people who have come, and I actually love this one almost the most. I've seen people who've come through a transition. Inanita tends to attract a lot of people who've leapt out of their day to day already in order to end up on the side of a volcano in Nicaragua. Normally, you've decided to take a leap. But I've seen people actually decide to go back to something more normal. A woman that comes to mind, she was a corporate buyer
Mhm.
and she left her corporate job and she had been traveling for a couple of years and she was slowly running out of finances. She did the yoga teacher training. I did my yoga teacher training. I did my ayahuasca ceremonies. So it became the spiritual bucket list. She'd completed the spiritual bucket list and she was running out of money. And
Mhm.
she hadn't figured out she wanted to be a sound healer, she wanted to be this, she wanted to be that, and it just was not working for her. It was blocking her all the way in the finances. She couldn't support herself anymore without finding a way forward. And she really deeply embraced going back to finding a job. She got a job working for Walmart again. You know what she did? She ensured that all of the Walmart products that were self-labeled in the region where she was a buyer were made out of organic cotton.
Uh,
Do you know what it changed that makes?
Huge change.
Huge change. She took off the mask. She stopped trying to be the yoga lady. That was the mask she had actually learned to put on as a layer on top of the previous mask. And in the real unmasking, she realized, I'm actually a woman who likes having a regular house and an air conditioner. What can I do from that place? Who can I be from that place?
Yeah.
And so that these are the kinds of experiences I've seen people leave their lives and move to Ometepe and build a natural environment when they take off the mask to live in because that inspired them. I've seen them think they were never going to have children and decide all they want to do is live a super simple life raising children on the side of a volcano. And I've seen people take off the mask and decide that they actually needed to go and become Bitcoin aficionados.
Sure. And all of it
It
is
includes
valid. All of it is good. And I think that's also where it comes in, that this journey towards self actualization, it often involves the reconciliation of parts of ourselves that we've maybe never seen or that we've hidden, or our shadow selves even, and
abandoned.
yeah, abandoned, shamed, and the reconciliation of that with our higher aspirations and shedding the masks is
No, it's
first
key.
part.
I think it's ultimately one of the things. Also, if I dare say, I've seen people become more well.
Mm, mhm.
Like speaking of a wellness perspective, like I've seen people become alive again. I've seen sicknesses, digestive. I've seen people like I can't say that I have definitive scientific monitoring and evaluation proof, but I've had personal anecdotal experiences over and over again where somebody has like irritable bowel syndrome or they're having digestive issues. And then all of a sudden they start to relax into the center of who they are and their physical ailments go away.
And often probably also emotional or mental. We talked about this before we hit record. How many people are taking, for example, SSRIs, and just in order to be function in a dysfunctional environment? When they do not take the SSRIs, they feel out of control. They feel as a natural response to a messed up environment, right? But instead, we suppress the response, we manage the response, or let's say people have GI issues or autoimmune issues or whatever it is.
Children in the ADHD and the whole behavioral thing, that's a part of this conversation that I think you're pointing to as well. We're medicating, we're completely medicating. Not only something else that we're doing that's not even through the pharma field
Mhm.
is we're medicating our dopamine levels through some of the techniques and some of the social media through and this goes again with the mask because the social media that is like we're feeding our dopamine system, which is designed to actually be a reward system that is through the effort that we engage in for outcomes. So the
Mhm.
chop wood, carry water. Actually, when I light a fire as a human, I feel really good because I've efforted to light the fire. When I no longer have to effort, but I'm really like just engaged in putting on a mask to receive the dopamine hits, I'm creating a different neurological relationship.
Yes.
And that alone is a medication, not just the SSRIs.
Thank you
So
for
what?
pointing that out.
Yeah, but please continue on this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's such an excellent point, and it's so easy to get addicted to that. Also, social media, be a consumer versus a creator, or being a creator not because you have something that you really wish to share, but because you want the likes, right? You
Mhm.
want the attention, whatever. And our human condition, we're marked for a quest for meaning and connection and transcendence, in also not in the way that we've talked about before. Want to leave this place, still place.
Or connection. Let's rather than call it transcendence, I think it's
Yeah,
connection.
true. So that's part of our human condition, and I think there's such great challenges and also great opportunity that humanity faces on this quest. There's so many distractions,
I
right?
want to cycle back actually to something you brought up before is this conversation about the masculine and feminine, because I think we're coming back into that
Mhm.
right now. This hyper focus on the masculine, because what you just said prompted me to go through a thought process. looking for meaning. So even if I have nothing meaningful to say, I'm going to make myself say something meaningful so that I can get the likes. This is effectively a masculine, it's me doing, it's me acting, it's me as agent, it's me arrow forward, right? And that is what is valued today. What is not valued is the feminine, which is the person who sits in the background and supports. That doesn't mean about men or women. It's not what I'm saying. I just want that to be abundantly clear, lest I get misquoted. But I once was in a circle with community and I was given a bunch of shit because I can be a bit attached to outcomes, rigid, let's say at times, and liking things my way, as many of us can. But I invited two women to take on roles in the InanItah community at a time when other people were vying for those roles. And we have a very open forum for people to be themselves. And so that means that even as the leader of the community, I create a space for people to judge me, basically. And the judgment was, you chose these two people because they're yes people, which is considered a negative in our society. Is it not? Yes. And don't be a yes man. Don't be a lackey. Don't be and I was like, actually, there is, and I stood up and not necessarily in defense of myself, but I did, I said, you know what? I hadn't realized that, but you're 100% right. And right now, because I have this responsibility and this responsibility, and I'm in a field where actually there are a lot of people pushing against the edges of what it takes for me to fill those responsibility. I need some people who know how to say yes. Nobody knows how to say yes anymore. Thank God for people that know how to say yes, because that yes attitude is actually somewhat considered now not okay, which is actually taking something away from the feminine, because the feminine says yes.
Yes,
Until it hurts itself, which is where the boundary is, where it says no. But the feminine wants to say, yes, I'm here to support.
I'm here to support. I am receptive. And this surrender has nothing to do with submission. That's also important to point out. And
Yes.
really important to point out also is that this maligning of yes people is actually a maligning of
It's the feminine.
feminine. And it's very similar and tied to where, you know, how I may have brought this up once before, but where even the most well-meaning people, because we're so informed by what goes on. So when somebody says, "Oh, you're such a pussy," and they mean it as an insult, where this should not be an insult. If you look at what a pussy is, it's one of just the most beautiful, life-giving thing that exists. It's literally a portal to different dimensions. So to being called a pussy should be an honor, right? And not
You are preaching some back in the 90s, not to take it like I've been saying that whenever somebody calls, yeah, they like, thank you. I am the fiercest, most highly consuming, highly creative thing we got going on this planet. Thank you very much.
100%. So
100%.
you
Because it
know,
doesn't only give life, it consumes.
yeah, yeah.
People often think of the sexual act between a man and a woman as this, he's taking her.
No, taken down.
Actually, he's surrendering a part of his body into hers temporarily. It's a two-way street. We could look at it both ways. I'm not saying I want that idea of what it is to take over the other idea, but let's just look at it in balance. There's a taking, there's a consuming, there's a giving, give it to her. Yeah, okay. That's sometimes I like to have it given to me, but sometimes I'm busy
Yep,
sucking it in. Thank you for lending it to me.
indeed. Yes, and
Thank you for lending me your joystick. It's very helpful.
that's actually also where one of the deep fears, I think it has been.
Vaginist and Titus.
Yes, exactly. Vagina. They
The Pink
moved out of
Floyd
that.
movie.
Say
What
again?
The Wall, the Pink Floyd movie?
No, there's actually a movie that's been made within the
Oh, no,
last
but
year.
in The Wall, if you ever watch it again,
Huh?
check out, there's a whole section of The Wall from the late 70s that it's a anime of Vaginist and Titus.
I didn't realize.
And there's a Venus flytrap movie. Is that the one you're referring to?
No, it's a movie
Oh,
with the last 2, 3 years, a young woman who she basically wakes up and discovers she has a toothed vagina. And I've not watched it, but I found the premise really intriguing
that
because
is
close to a very, and it connects to a very primal fear that obviously has to do with this very powerful, dark, raw,
All consuming.
feminine, also the destruction, and destruction is also part of creation. So anyways, it's interesting because when we separate things, like it's either or,
Right.
that's problems arise. When we move out of this dualistic way of seeing and experiencing things, then stuff
Well,
shifts.
and that brings us back to the Tantra, which is because Tantra honors duality
Mm,
inside of the wholeness.
mhm.
And so I've seen sometimes, we were talking about some of the misconceptions of Tantra, and I think it's great to bring this one to light that you're bringing to light right now. One of the misconceptions is that we have to polarize more men and women to create a higher creative pulse. And I think that uh, is not of service. I think what you're saying right now is of a higher service. It's of recognizing that we're on a dance of understanding. And sometimes the perspective or the assemblage point, as Castaneda would say, is over here. And sometimes the assemblage point is over here. And the real wisdom is being able to switch those points of perception to gain a whole understanding of what.
Yes,
Yeah,
guys.
that's what Tantra is asking us to do. But when it gets simplified, it gets watered down.
And which ties back into something you said at the very beginning of our conversation, which was that in your life, it's always been about the change, right? Oh, it's
Mm.
flow. And when we are able to flow, what a beautiful journey this can be. And I absolutely love this conversation with you, Gaia. I have a feeling we could sit around a fire
Right.
and talk for hours until the moon rises and then the sun comes up. And this has been really magnificent. I am so grateful for your time and for sharing of yourself and these, yeah, beautiful, profound insights. I am certain that the audience would also like to know how can they find you or connect with you? What are some offerings you want to share that people may feel called to?
I have 3 primary offerings. You can come and visit me at InanItah in this wonderful paradise that I have co-created with others. So that's if you wanna get connected to the land, feel safe to take off the mask, just rejuvenate, maybe get a taste of what it's like to come back and receive from the earth. I think that's an opportunity there, and receive from your own earthiness. But I also offer the Tantric Way, which is a 3-week personal development process. It's a stripping away of limiting beliefs. It's an empowerment to use the tools of sex magic that we discussed earlier for self-development. It has some of what the more mainstream Tantra world, one of the 3 weeks is devoted to conscious relationships, healthy relationship dynamics, sexual healing, sexual wounding, healing, rebridging. So it's basically a journey from your childhood, understanding where your self-limiting beliefs came from, shifting them, connecting with each other. This is the Love and Sexuality Week, and then how to make that a part of our purpose and our collective consciousness, the
Mm.
further development. So that is the Tantric Way. And then the last thing that I offer is called a transformational facilitator training. I've been facilitating people for 20 some years now. And so these are people who like how I facilitate or who want to become stronger facilitators. The key element in the work that might set it apart from another type of coaching training is my key focus is on actually getting into a place where we allow magic to happen. That I'm not the doer, but I'm actually how to put spirit in charge rather than me in charge as facilitator. How to really allow magic with tools that exist, learning the tools, but also learning how to get away out of the way enough to let the magic happen.
Awesome.
Awesome. So those are the main things that I lead. You can find me on GaiaMa.com or GaiaGasm.com
Super.
and Inanita at InanItah.com.
Oh gosh, that sounds like such an incredible place. I hope I'll get the opportunity to come visit at some point.
I hope so too.
Mhm.
I would love to, yeah, invite you out there at any time.
I won't bring my Erewhon box.
I'll give you it. I don't have to give you a box. I will I will let you graze from the garden like a deer and show you which ones to mix so you'll get your full on range of yumminess.
That sounds incredible. Gaia, thank you so much. It was truly such a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it.